everyone.
Take the drive.
Hello.
30 minutes, 25 minutes.
Hi. Hi. Welcome. Welcome. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul. I'm a person in recovery. And welcome to our presentation, Engagement for the Recovery Ready Workplace. This has been a long time. I'm very grateful to Mass Hire, formerly known as Career Point.
We got a throwback.
Yes. So very grateful to be here live and in person. So this is I want to say it's kind of new because it's been a minute, So welcome. We have a bunch of material we're going to cover. Some thoughts, some concepts, some facts. We're going to talk about what's going on. I know that you all have had the orientation already towards the Recovery Ready Workplace, so this would be the next step in how do I now engage with my staff, with my community, right? With my family, with my people, whoever that may be, but in your case, for your staff, the workforce. So, here are objectives. Would somebody like to read out loud, please?
Sure, I will.
Thank you.
Objectives. This workshop will support participants to relate to substance and mental health challenges, review what recovery may look like for individuals, exploring a response to individuals who may have such challenges, assess the importance of developing a recovery-oriented approach.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. Any thoughts or questions? Anything pop up as you're looking at the objectives here? Is anybody in the wrong place? Excellent. So, a few topics that we're going to look at is intention. Right? That's the first thing. What brings us here today? Right? You can follow along in your workbooks. It's over on page 3 in your workbook. So we're going to talk about wellness. Okay, what is addiction and mental health? Stigma, right? How do we now talk about it? What do we hear, about these things? And then this word, recovery. In the past few years, it's kind of everywhere, and there's all types of initiatives. Thankfully, knock on wood, that gets people to be well and productive and go from less than 0 to Iron Man, right? I want to be that Iron Man. Right? So, and then how do we get there? How do we get to recovery, right? And then where does it go from there? What might it look like? Then we're going to talk about something called recovery capital, which we'll look at for us individually as people, right? And what does it look like for our community, right? What does it look like for your staff, for your organization? And then we're going to have a couple little scenarios. We're going to discuss, how can you put some of these things into action so you can better connect and engage with your staff. I see some heads shaking. Making sense? Some kind of building blocks, one step after the next. So let's get rolling. See, in your workbook on the next page, you're gonna take a moment to write what brings you to leading a recovery-ready workplace initiative with your staff. moment, some people are still writing. All right, so as you go, when you share, if you just say your name and where you work, that would be wonderful. So we have a short time, but we'll get to know little bits of you and where you may be coming from. Would anybody like to share? Well,
Sure. My name's Kevin. I work at Mass Hire.
hi, Kevin.
Hi, Paul. And I enjoy work that helps to improve the lives of others while also providing opportunities to learn about myself.
Aha. Work that provides opportunities for others while being able to learn more and grow yourself. Excellent. Thank you, Kevin.
My name is Salinas. I work at Mass Hire Holyoke. I put to help those in need of guidance and support, to give them a starting point, to give them a chance at success.
Give people a starting point and a chance at success. Thank you, Selena.
Melinda, also Mass Hire Holyoke, to create a welcoming environment for all, to provide resources, support to those who need it, to encourage those who need it, to reach out in a safe place to be themselves.
Safe place to be themselves, providing support for those who need it. Thank you, Melinda.
You're welcome.
Hi, Ramona from Mass Hire. I think that SUDS has affected our daily lives in many ways, like personally and professionally, in the ways to address those issues, have more talk and more communication about it, and to educate each other so that we can break down the stigma of people that are suffering from this in silence.
Wow. Breaking down stigma. SUDS affects all of us, right, in one way or another. Everyone knows someone, so for those of you, SUDS, substance use disorders, right, affect us, and we're seeing it more and more, and here we have the opportunity to actually start talking about this stuff, right, because the more we talk about the pink elephant, the smaller it gets, right, so it's communication, learning, and really information, right, and what do we do with that information, right, and how do we use it to be supportive of ourselves, right, as well as others. Thank you. So now, substance use disorders, learning, personal growth, opportunity. This brings us to the question here. Now, if we were to ask this question, what is wellness, right? What would you say?
Healthy,
To be healthy, okay? Big 20,000 foot view, so to speak, right? Could somebody break this down a little bit? Just to pick on you for a moment. What would it mean to be healthy?
Well, there's physical and mental.
Okay, physical, mental. What?
I think when it comes to what is wellness, it's how you're feeling about yourself, mind, body, and soul.
Okay. How you feel about the self, okay, and then you have your mind, body, and then here, all right, soul. Someone else, what would you add? Balance, having balance, okay? Can you speak a little bit more to balance?
Basically what we're going on there, physical, mental, emotional, you know, all
Okay.
those aspects of
It makes me think of the tires on your car, right? They all kind of should be somewhere. Mine's one of them's a little flatter, and we got to give it a little bit of attention there.
Also thinking like, feeling like you're supported, like, you know, that you have your circle of support.
Ah, okay, feeling being supported. Excellent.
So I'm thinking, I guess, two parts. So one part is kind of more like physical needs, like housing, food, like, you know, the basic things you need
Okay.
to feel safe, I guess. And then the other aspect is, I guess, kind of a growth mindset of like, how do you return to yourself, return to compassion, return to self-love to kind of move through the flow. I think a lot of time we talk about like stability, and so then when we don't feel stable, it's like, you know, this big thing, but kind of going on that balance of like, how do you maintain that flow and, return to self-care, whatever that means, or compassion, or, you know, allowing yourself to move through whatever is happening.
Excellent. I love that, because now, once I get to the destination, now what, right? Oh, I've achieved this balance, right? Or I've achieved like this numbers or this weight, or, you know, whatever that is that we're seeking or looking to achieve. Now what do I do, right? I've graduated, great, I can hang out on the couch for the next year, can I, right? So, well, let's see here. I found a really fun new definition from the Global Wellness Institute. Would somebody like to read?
the active pursuit of activities, choices, and lifestyles that lead to a state of holistic health.
Ah, what does this bring up? Some of you have touched on, we've touched on this.
Choice is the word that stands out for me there.
Yeah.
Lifestyle and choice, right? So lifestyle, what is it that I do, you know, my day to day? How do I live, right? What choices do I make? Not necessarily do I have, because sometimes they might be limited, but there's still a choice to make, right? What else? Holistic. And what does that speak to?
Well, we have a wellness
I
wheel.
was just gonna say that. I was just gonna
That
say
includes
that.
8 components. Is it
Okay.
in here? I think it's in
Okay,
there.
okay, yes, so.
But it's, yeah, it's like all, it's looking at
Multifaceted.
something, you know, in its totality instead of just a smaller part, right?
Aha. Well, now we're looking at multifaceted, right? And when you shared earlier about being supported, now we're talking. There's something outside of me, right? So there's another component here besides my piece, right? So
The active pursuit.
the active. Ooh, and there is that piece. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Joelle?
Joelle brought up that growth mindset, right? So there's that active pursuit piece,
Never-ending process.
right? That it is a process. Thank you. I like that you said that word, process. It's not just overnight, you know? Did you have something, Kevin?
No, sorry.
All right, so are we understood here? You had something earlier you were gonna share.
Me?
Yes.
Oh no, I was just the active pursuit and just the choices. That's what stuck out with me because I take my wellness like serious. So I'm exercising, I'm reading, you know, putting myself out there in nature. So and I'm choosing to do that. I'm choosing to have that lifestyle. So that's what I got out of that.
Wonderful. And your name?
David.
David. Thank you, David. Thank you. Yeah, so here's that.
There it is.
There it is, right? The 8 dimensions, and this is from SAMHSA, and that's the Substance Use and Mental Health Services Administration, that is the federal government. We like them, they do a lot of research and a lot of wonderful work and really provide a lot of support for the world of folks with mental health challenges and substance use disorders. So, so here, in these 8 different areas, like, so what makes it important, you know, that we actually recognize?
To have a balance in life. Well, if you're missing something in your life, like for example, it could be the emotional, could be the spiritual, you know, we have to have balance, because if we don't have a balance, there's always gonna be something missing in your life.
Okay, so why else would it be important to recognize these areas? Let's get a couple of, to have balance. There might be something missing.
It's like the spider with 8 legs, like if he's missing a leg, he's off.
Okay. I'll have never thought of spiders in that way.
I just thought there was 8 and that's where I got spider from, so.
Excellent, yes, insects have 6 legs, spiders have 8. So, okay, so you can be off, right? And there, at times, we're gonna need different things, right? I might not always have to, you know, look at certain areas, right? Because I might be cruising along and everything might be, you know, okay in that area, until something comes up, or, you know, at different times. And we're gonna speak more about this, where we all have different needs at different times. Sometimes we gotta rev a little more. Other times, you know, we
Nice
gotta
time.
kick it back, you know, in some areas, right? So, so now here's the next piece. Now, how do alcohol and other drugs affect an individual's wellness?
Many ways, I mean, drugs can affect your occupation. I mean, you might, you know, be addicted and that's all you are gonna be wasting all your money, or you might not show up to work, so you get fired. Drugs can, you know, mess with your emotions. Like if you're feeling some type of way, they tend to enhance that. I don't know, some people, I know some friends who are, you know, addicted, they don't even leave their house, so they're not even out like in the environment, and it just it attacks everything. If it attacks one part of the wheel, all of them tend to get affected by it.
Okay. If it can address any pieces of those, right? It can affect any of those pieces. Something else to add? Maybe we could get a little more specific. Because do you need to be addicted to have a challenge with alcohol
No.
or other
No.
drugs? Great.
I think that you're not paying attention to the areas, if you're, you know, if that's happening, you're not paying attention to those parts of your wellness wheel, so to speak. And you could be numbing yourself so much that you're not in touch with those areas of your life.
Right, it could be covering up a whole lot of different stuff, right? It might even just mask things or just take your attention off of certain areas, right? Tasks.
I was just gonna mention that this, like you said, you don't have to be addicted, because you can have a family member or someone who's dealing with that, and that can still affect one out of the 8. Your emotions, your intellectual, your physical needs, your financial. Like even if you're not addicted, you know, that's how alcohol and other drugs can still affect your wellness, even if you're not the one on it.
Yeah, imagine if you don't drive and you're out with your partner who's driving, and they have a couple of drinks and they're maybe, you know, they're not falling over, but they're, you know, feeling good or whatnot. Now, how are you gonna get home? That might affect, right? That might affect you, the next day, right? Now, we have a teammate whose son was doing a wonderful favor to take his friends, right, home because they were drinking and whatnot. But he didn't remember that he needed a car to get back home. So at 1 a.m, he was calling mom and dad, right, who said, hey, you can call at any time, right, which is wonderful, right? But now that, and they don't even live in the same house, right? And now it's affecting, you know, folks. So, what else? Anything else? It's popping up. So we mentioned some short-term pieces, right? So here, I don't know if you could see this, but here, risk of addiction, right? Oh, and this is in your workbook. You have a whole bunch of, you have a list of different impacts, right? Right, long-term use, you know, then might lead to addiction or dependence of sorts, right? Mental health challenges, right? Using substances can lead to paranoia and other anxiety, right? Being aggressive, right? Could lead to heart attack, right? Breathing problems, infectious diseases, right? Now my guard is down, so to speak, right? My inhibitions are down. So, and you have some information here, so you know that in 2020, alcohol use practically, the effects of alcohol use practically killed as many people as opioid use disorder, right? 100,000, so 99,000 people with alcohol and 100,000, like literally, people with opioid use disorder. So this is directly linked to, and from 2019 to 2020, folks with mental health and addiction challenges, in 2019, it was 20.23 million people, and in 2020, it was 40.3 million people in the United States alone. So these are just a few things. Now we're talking like long-term effects, right? You hear all the time, hey, I smoked for 6 years and 30 years later, now I have a health condition or I have a health challenge, right? Or there's the person that you know, tried cannabis once and had a psychotic disorder, you know, some kind of psychotic event that now they're in the hospital, right? And we just don't know what our biology, you know, does, right? Regardless, you know, like your headache medicine, aspirin, whatnot might work for one person and it might be really detrimental to the next, right? So now what does this look like? You know, if you think about somebody with a mental health and or substance use challenges, right? I like to call it substance use challenges because I'm not a doctor. I don't know if they have a disorder or if they, you know, diagnose people, right? But it might be a challenge, and it could be a really simple challenge, like, hey, I get kind of real happy and giddy, and you know, maybe it's keeping me from my work, or maybe be really impaired and can hurt someone, or I can black out, right? Wake up under somebody's kitchen table, which isn't mine. I wouldn't want that for you. So what might this look like? Think about your everyday, you know, folks that you might come across, or
I mean, with people I've interacted, I know it's even some family members, unfortunately, you know, timing, they're not, you know, they struggle trying to remember things or show up on time or just show up in general, like physically or in the moment. Like, I know I've seen that with my cousins, and he's dealing with something right now, and there's times where he'll promise he's gonna show up and he doesn't show up, or when he's physically there, you just see it in his face, he's not with us. So
Like anybody in this room.
I was just gonna say that. It can look like
Yeah.
just, sometimes you can't tell.
Ah, sometimes
Kinda
you,
maybe dive deep into moderate to severe. Look for worst cases.
sometimes you can't tell, right? And it just seems like, hey, that's the way that person's always
Functional,
been, right? Yeah, the whole idea of functional, if you're breathing, you're functioning, right? But to what degree, right? I mean, you could have, you know, the person that goes to work every day, you know, and comes home and kicks back with a couple, you know, couple drinks or whatnot, enjoys, wants to relax, right? You know, once in a while, I don't know. Are they at their full potential? Are they achieving everything that they can? You know, that's for each individual to recognize. Maybe they don't want to, you know, go any further than where they're at, right? Maybe they're content, right? Hey, I've gone to this place and now I'm okay, right? And then, you know, what happens to that place where it's active, you know, that active pursuit, right, of wellness. And I love the fact that you brought that up, that it can look like anyone, any one of us. It's not just the individual, right, holding the door for you, asking for change at the bank. I rarely even have any change or a dollar or anything but a card, right? So, that can be. So let's see, I have a little video here. Figure this out. Okay. Oh, speaker. Sound.
You might have to put, do you see that speaker right there, Paul, on the table?
In front of you.
Does that turn on?
I thought I heard it before.
Something's on there, it was. Oh, it's not a speaker.
Has use of alcohol or drugs ever seem out of control for you or a loved one? Has it ever seemed like the line between fun and dysfunction is unclear? About 60% of Americans aged 12 and older currently use alcohol or drugs. For some, this use can become an addiction, or what we call substance use disorder, or an SUD. An SUD involves out-of-control use of a substance even though it causes you harm. People with an SUD become focused on using the substance to the point where they have problems with day-to-day functioning. People with serious SUD will continue to use substances, even when they know it is causing or can cause harm. Heavy substance use directly impacts the body and mind, and can affect parts of the brain that control how you think, make decisions, learn, remember, and control your behavior. How can I help someone struggling with substance use disorders? Learn all you can, speak up, and offer constructive support. And don't wait for them to hit bottom. Substance use disorders are treatable and recovery is possible. For more information on substance use disorders, including treatment options, please visit www.psychiatry.org.
Alright. Any thoughts on some of you might be familiar with some of the information. You know, today's a new day. Maybe something different came up now that you're looking from a different direction, different angle, possibly.
It can be as simple as, would life be better without it?
Would life be better without it?
Quality of life.
looking at somebody's quality of life. Without substances, well, maybe how do I recognize, how would you say, how would you recognize somebody might have a challenge, in your day-to-day, with your staff, maybe it was somebody who's having some kind of challenge.
Ask. Communication.
Communication,
That's the only way.
would you like to,
I was to say, I mean, we can't assume, so the only way in will be to ask. I agree with Kevin.
excellent, ask, communicate, and that means you have to, what kind of relationship would you have with someone?
Positive.
A positive
A
relationship?
trusting
A
relationship.
trusting
Supportive
relationship,
relationship.
supportive relationship?
And Paul, how would you ask that very difficult question?
I'm sorry?
How would you ask?
How would you ask that very difficult question? Can you paraphrase it for us?
Well, you can approach it with just curiosity, right, and really empathy, like, hey, how you feeling today, or I noticed there's something different, your energy is different. Usually energy is a good little piece, and say, oh, you're hyped up, or this, oh, your energy is a little more energetic today, right, or you're a little lower energy today, how was your breakfast? Something simple, like really from a place of care and concern, but it begins with that, that intention. I come to a place that I care about, right, and I'm doing stuff that I care about, and I care about what I'm doing and the people around me, right, so it builds that trust, builds confidence, right? So this is all these interpersonal, pieces, that here I'm focused on my wellness, and we're not perfect, right? We're humans, so we're 1000% guaranteed to be fallible at some point, somewhere along, right? Our continuum. So, how can we be transparent with others as well, right? So, sharing little bits of what might be going on with me in a positive way, or curious way, or really a way, hey, I'm looking at these, I might be having a challenge today, right? Maybe not minimizing it, say, look, I'm addressing this. This is what might be going on, and some things are more appropriate than others, obviously, and how we present them to each other, within our day-to-day. How did that answer your?
I just wanted some examples.
Yeah, it's really that curious piece coming from empathy and concern. You can't go wrong. If you think of, like, I've been that person with low energy. I've been the person maybe being like a little too excited about stuff at times, right? Whether it was natural or not, right? So that really, that identification, and there's a couple more pieces, that'll get into that as we go. So, mental health challenges. Let's go there for a moment. What are mental health challenges? What would you?
Depression.
Depression, right? Anxiety. Maybe I'm just feeling a little sad today, right? I'm feeling a little bit nervous about something. Right, not being a doctor, I wouldn't go straight to, like, and in today's world, or, for even before COVID and all this stuff, it's very common, like, oh, that's my anxiety's kicking up again. People throw this stuff around like it's nothing, like, oh yeah, I'm kind of depressed a bit today. People just use this in their everyday language. I wouldn't encourage you to repeat that kind of stuff back to folks. Maybe how can you get language or use words that are softer, right? Because we don't know. I don't know. Maybe somebody's joking about it and they really do have this type of disorder or challenge. Maybe they don't. I I don't know, right? And I don't wanna be that direct either, cause you know, that might not be appropriate, you know, in an HR type of way, right? So this very everyday human experience language, right? What else comes up when you think of mental health challenges?
There's a lot of different, types of mental health. When it comes at least to like depression and stuff like that, there's different types of that.
Okay.
So there's like the environmental, the clinical, you know, and there's like suicidal, you know, there's a lot of mental health issues. And I think there's a lot of people struggling with that these days, more than we're used to knowing.
Yeah.
And it starts from a very early age these days.
So how might you know about this? Again, you know, one of your
Signs.
colleagues,
Signs, there's signs.
signs, okay. For example,
For example, a normal person and all of a sudden you feel a sadness and you notice a person from being happy to completely sad or crying for no reason, or a person who says that life is not worth living, or there's a lot of stuff that are signs, they're just signs, I don't know how to explain it.
Change in behavior, I think, you know, so like I'm a really extroverted person, I'm always talking and joking around, but you know when I'm really busy, cause you don't hear me, right? You're like, are you okay, are you okay? Because I'm busy, I'm in thought, or maybe I'm stressed or whatever, you know, whatever's going on, but I think it's paying attention to those behavior cues that they have, that each of us have, you can kinda tell, you know, you just pick up on them, or at least I can, I don't know if everybody can, but I can read body language and how they dress and how they carry themselves and.
I was just gonna say, there could be physical clues too, like somebody saying they're sleeping way more or not sleeping at all, could be a sleep thing happening, could be, yeah, just change in how somebody like outwardly is presenting themselves, maybe a big change in that.
yeah, it's can be subtle. It's not always as extreme as like, hey, I'm gonna hurt myself, right? Even though that you know may happen. You know, people may just outwardly express whatever they have going on, you know, in their personal lives, at home, or even professionally. However, we're so stressed, right?
It's rare at work though, I would say, like, I feel like it's harder to detect something like that when you're working with people, because some people are good at putting up fronts, you know, very good at it, and especially in a work environment, like a lot of what you're saying in terms of like talking to somebody, maybe if you're like good friends with them or very close to them, it'd be easier to talk about like, you know, you seem different, you know, let's talk about this, but from like a supervisor to, you know, that's trickier, I think. Like the person's gonna feel nervous about their job, you know, they're gonna feel nervous about expressing themselves, so I think it's really challenging in the workplace. And I see all this stuff, like when I'm thinking of my friends and I'm thinking, you know, but in the workplace, it's a different setting.
Yeah, people can kind of put on a show, put on a mask, but you know, people can really like get through their day and put up like, you know, block things out that you just wouldn't know, you know. So what does it come up then? Like, so how would that come about, or how would you address it? I just had somebody last week call me about somebody in their workforce who had a setback, right? And they had gone through different avenues and you know, some couple of punitive things, and then they took away, you know, a work day, or you know, a couple of things, and then they're like, what else do we do, right? They offered support, they offered EAP. So what does it boil down to?
Boils down to communicating more so you can build that trust.
communicating more so you
And
can
then
build that.
really, if you're deciding that you're doing this, then you're deciding that you're either changing or you have the culture that this is gonna be a non-judgmental thing and you are truly invested. And you can't take this recovery ready workplace lightly. You can't go in and say, okay, well, you no longer have a job because you can't run machinery, you can't do this, like, you have to try and figure out where that trust is and build on that.
So yeah, building a culture, right? Where now I as an employee or worker, right, I feel comfortable coming in and maybe not talking to everybody, you know, but maybe with my supervisor, or my manager, or the director, or my colleague, right? Who am I speaking with and who do I feel comfortable with? And hey, I feel supported here, right? And when you first said, you know, this is hard to see at work, and I thought, well, you guys have a fun, you know, environment, at least from an external perspective, right? Fun place, wonderful place, a lot of good things here, you know, people here long term, you know, which isn't every place, you know, unfortunately, but maybe soon enough people start recognizing that, like, hey, you know what, maybe I can speak up a little more, share a little something else, and you know, how can we now really build this culture of trusting one another? And I know that if I'm gonna share that I'm having this challenge, that I'm not just gonna get ousted or cut or whatnot, or sent to the office up in the hills, you know. So
That's why initiatives like this are so important, because then they won't be as worried, like Mona was saying, about talking openly. They won't have that worry or fear of opening up if there's, you know, programs like this where employers are more understanding and supportive of it.
and I was getting to earlier was the piece where the work performance. You know, if somebody's, you know, doing their work and they're going through whatever they're going through, and they're able to perform and maintain that, okay. You know, once that starts affecting their performance and their outcomes and you know, then might be more obvious, right? Because then it starts affecting the people around them in the department and whatnot as well.
You know, Paul, that's a good point to bring up. We have a lot of transference of feelings when you're helping somebody in mental health, crisis or substance use. And, you know, at some point on our team, everybody experiences that, whether someone relapses or someone goes missing or someone gets shot, and, you know, just we try and we encourage, I wanna say, talk to us about it when we have our team leaders reach out to somebody, because it's like a secondhand PTSD sort of thing that's hitting upon. It's like you're experiencing that trauma second or third hand, but you're still experiencing it. So just being aware of that.
Especially when you're in a role, when you're a helper, right, so to speak, right? Like what you do here at Mass Hire, right? You support other folks, right? I wanna be helpful, I wanna make a difference, right? And we end up taking a lot of stuff on, right? And when you talk about, you know, burnout and all that kind of stuff, it's really us being attached to other people's outcomes, you know, oh, they weren't able, or they, you know, failed at this, or they, you know, went backwards again, or they, you know, whatever it is now, that affects, and not to say that it wouldn't, right, because we're human and we have emotions and we care about what we do, but how do I now really create a healthy atmosphere? So now if I'm recognizing, hey, maybe I'm, you know, taking on too much, or now I'm like covering up or whatnot, now by talking about this stuff, now I'm recognizing, hey, this doesn't feel so good anymore, because now I'm doing not just my job, but I'm doing half of her job too, right? So how do this is where we now, you know, have these discussions and a little bit of information, a little bit of taking action can make all the difference, you know, in the world. Just recognizing, identifying, hey, this is, maybe I'm not the person with this substance use disorder, but you know, hey, I had this event where I did not feel good after XYZ happened, or you know what, I took this on too much but now I feel bad because now I failed, but really it came from this, you know, a bunch of different choices that I made, right, that affected all of this. So here's a little definition. Somebody like to read? Somebody else out loud, please?
A mental health challenge is a medical condition that disrupts a person's thinking, feeling, mood, ability to relate to others, and daily functioning.
What's coming up?
I have a lot of mental health challenges. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm one of them.
I'm sorry, you had something?
No, I said that's exactly it. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, it really, kind of buttons it up, so to speak, right? It disrupts, your thinking, it disrupts, how you're thinking, how you're feeling, your
Especially the mood.
actions.
The mood change,
Ah,
that's like a huge, sign of people with mental health. The mood change, sometimes they're like super hyper, super nice, super happy, and all of a sudden they're like, don't talk to me. I'm sad for no reason. It's kind of difficult to
Yeah.
deal with.
maybe no visible reason, right? To us. So, speaking of, what is visible? How do people look at, maybe it is the obvious person pushing the shopping cart outside, right? How are people viewed who might have substance use or mental health challenges?
Weak.
Weak,
I was just gonna say that.
Exhausted.
say it.
exhausted,
I know, right? Less than.
less than, ugh,
Chaotic?
chaotic,
Crazy.
crazy,
Worthless.
worthless. Private eye guy, blowing you up on your workbook, right on, was that page 10? So yeah, so if we're gonna be honest, right? I mean, and these are just a couple, right? And these are just a couple of pieces here. So we have another piece here. There it is. Okay. I'm gonna watch this video here, then we'll discuss afterwards. And this should be discrimination, right? People are discriminated against. So here.
You can be born perfectly rich, have a very good lifestyle, have parents who care very well for you. I don't think mental health issues discriminate against anyone of any race, gender, or social background.
Hi, nice to meet you. Please have a seat.
My name is Nicole. I'll be your moderator for this discussion.
I'm Nicholas. Today, I'm going to ask you a few questions about mental health in Singapore. What do you know about mental illness?
I just know there's depression.
Or
How do you say that? Bipolar disorder.
The wire short circuit,
This guy is crazy, sound, this kind of words.
That's nothing to repeat.
Would you hire somebody with mental health condition?
I'll probably make them work in a admin side.
Shipper, cleaner, or some simple job like that.
Either they hurt themselves or they're going to hurt someone else. Then if you have mental illness, you apply for a job. I mean, who in the right sense would really want to take you?
Would you date somebody who has a mental health condition?
Some of them will get quite manipulative. They say like, if you break up with me, I'll cut myself or I'll kill myself.
And then sometimes they tend to post unreasonable things, such as like a small thing that happened, and then they make a big fuss out of it.
I cannot cannot handle. I don't know how to handle. How would you react to, you know, a friend or family member who's diagnosed with mental illness?
The bridging needs to be the family and not a stranger.
我们不是专业医生，我们可能处理不了。
If possible, I will just stay away as far as possible.
这个笑诶，最好是不要靠近他。
I didn't introduce myself fully. I suffer from clinical depression.
I was clinically diagnosed with depression. I'm living in recovery.
And I overcame it. I wrote a letter that I would like you to read out to me, Emma.
"12 years is a long time to live with a mental health condition.
In the 12 years that I've been diagnosed with depression,
This is what I've learned.
I've learned that the greatest battles we fight are the ones with ourselves.
I've learned that most conversation about employment end the moment I review my diagnosis. I've learned that shame is something society teaches you. I've learned how to say sorry for showing symptoms of my condition.
I've learned that friends can disappear, and I will never hear from them again.
I've learned that family doesn't always know how to support you, no matter how much you need them.
I've learned that hope is a little voice that whispers maybe.
I've learned that recovery is a process. I've learned that one small crack doesn't mean I'm broken.
I've learned that I have an illness, but this illness is not my identity.
so sorry that you're confused.
I'm so
Do you have any questions you want to ask me?
You didn't tell us you were gonna make us all cry today.
Very powerful.
It's really good. What came up for you?
I really kept saying mental illness, but in my mind, it's about recovery, it's about people with disabilities, it's about so many different stigmas that we have, and it's sad that people live with those and are treated the same ways, they, you know, the same kind of comments, you know, the judgmental side of it, you know. So you can replace the mental illness for just about anything that is a negative in our society.
Yeah, we're talking about that discrimination and stigma, right? Those pieces. What else?
And the one thing that stuck out to me is it's okay to go through this. You know, don't beat yourself up. I like that quote. Just because a small crack doesn't mean I'm broken. So,
And that line, what was it, when the voice in you whispers maybe.
The voice that says maybe. Yeah, it's identifying, you know, and being transparent and talking about things is hard, especially when you're in a culture that doesn't allow for that, right? So if you're hearing somebody, you know, pointing the finger and being negative towards a certain, you know, person or group of people or whatnot, right? I'm not gonna feel comfortable saying, you know, I have this or that or the other thing, you know, in that atmosphere, right? It's not gonna feel safe for me. So now I don't have anybody else to, as really a point of getting a different perspective, then how do I know, right, that there is something else, that there is a different reality or solutions or whatever, right? So that's where this piece of now recovery ready workplace and speaking, being able to speak about these things and creating an environment where we can have a discussion and be supportive and curious and caring at the end of the day, right? Really helps us all move forward. So here's, this is from 2017, and unfortunately the 2020 statistics came out, but they don't have these particular slides, and this speaks to people's reasons for not receiving. This one is for not receiving substance use treatment. If you look at this, what's the first thing that pops out?
I see that. Not ready to stop using.
I'm sorry?
Not ready to stop using.
Not ready to stop using?
No health care coverage.
No health care coverage. Here. Might have negative effect on job, might cause neighbors or community to have negative opinion, right? Let's look at the one for not receiving mental health. Could not afford cost, did not know where to go, thought they could handle the problem without treatment, concern for being committed, right? Or having to take medication, might have negative effect on job. Here might cause neighbors or community to have a negative opinion, concerned about confidentiality, did not want others to find out. Stigma. Stigma. And unfortunately, it's such a big piece of it. Anything else coming up here?
In my mind, I'm just wondering what's the bigger stigma, mental health or recovery, people in recovery?
Depends who has it. Depends who has it.
I feel like substance abuse is worse. I feel like if you see somebody out on the street here, on High Street, you see it all the time, somebody who's very clearly impaired, there's more of a stigma to that than somebody who suffers from bipolar or depression or because I feel like people are more relatable.
When I say, it depends who has it, if that person knows somebody personally, either with mental health or substance use disorder, so to speak, I think would kind of taint their view or stigma perception.
Yeah, the reality is this keeps people from getting help. This keeps people from speaking up. And if I can't speak up about it, even going to the doctor sometimes, yeah, I got this appointment and I'm not being authentic, I'm not being truthful with the doctor. Right? I remember, the doctor, oh, you drink alcohol? Oh, yeah, a couple. Right? That a couple, oh yeah, a couple glasses of wine with dinner, maybe a shot or two after two, it's all downhill. What he would tell me, but meanwhile, multiply that by a couple is what I had just a few hours before going to see him. Right? So yeah, it keeps us from being honest and straightforward, even with the people we love, professionals, and ultimately ourselves. So now, recovery. Right? What is recovery? If you were to get a couple answers, how would you define the most important thing here? Not how I define it, not how the people in the church basement define it, not how the doctor or the book defines it. How do you define recovery? everyone's recovered from something, keep that in mind, right? If I lose my wallet, maybe there's nothing in it, you know, like one document in there. Or maybe there's a whole lot of stuff in there, right? And it's a whole other. How would you define recovery? Let's just get a couple.
Finding yourself again.
Finding yourself again.
It's a process.
Finding self, okay? It is a process.
A way to overcome a struggle.
A way to overcome a struggle. Sorry.
I don't know if this makes taking accountability, like being
Okay.
accountable.
Yeah.
Like, you know you need.
Absolutely. Okay. Being accountable. To others.
Getting back in touch with your physical and mental needs,
Get
health
back in
needs.
touch. Okay. Back to the physical, mental, right? Someone else might say spiritual, right? Spiritual needs. You can switch out needs with wants. I'm more likely to do the wants than the needs, right?
A lifelong process of practices and principles to regain balance and quality of life.
Practices and principles.
No, I can see.
Okay, quality. Quality of life, right? Might bring on
Maintenance of.
maintenance, okay? And earlier we had growth in there. So we go one of my favorite definitions. Anyone would like to read out loud?
Process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential.
And what are the components that are popping out for you here? Process. And that looks different every day to day sometimes for us, right? In different areas.
Strive.
Strive.
Strive is important because it's telling you that it's not gonna take a day. Just like it's go hand in hand with process. But strive is saying that I know it's gonna be hard. That's what it tells me.
And if I'm striving for something, I'm likely to be probably attracted to that thing I'm striving for, right? It's attracting me. It's not pushing me, right? It's not pulling me, but it's somewhere that I want to go.
I think self-directed
yeah, I
is
was gonna say
important,
self-directed.
because if everybody's on their own personal journeys, you can't, what worked for one person doesn't work for another. You have to find what you're gonna strive for and what your process of change is gonna be, so it has to be self-directed.
I'm the one that has to take the steps for my recovery, right? For my wellness, right? For my well-being. So that means I have to use my skills and my strengths, right? Possibly get some supports in some other areas, right? Because I might not be 1,000% on all of those 8 areas every day, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about that now. Process of change. So here we have something called this. We're not going to get into this today, but just to give you a little overarching stages of change, right? I went from I don't have a problem to now I'm taking action, right? So there's different stages to get to that maintenance, right? But that maintenance is really just the beginning, it's considered like the first 6 months when I've taken action and have maintained that action, but then what happens, right? And then here, process of change to which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, right? This would be like, how do I do that, right? We're all individuals, we all have our own path, right? So that's the idea of multiple pathways. We're gonna touch on that, talk about that in a minute. And then striving to reach their full potential. Now there's stages to that, right? Because now that I'm in recovery, right? Maybe I have a couple of months, 6 months or a year, and I go to Mass Hire and I get my resume done, right? And I'm focused on now what? Now that's gonna be if I've been having these challenges for 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, and sometimes folks, say, oh, this has been really, this has been quite the challenge. Oh, how long has this been going on? Oh, past 3 years when I've been doing X substance or having X behavior. Oh, okay, so, you're 40 years old. So before 37, you've never had any encounter with substances? Oh no, I've been smoking, right, since I was 10. Okay, so didn't just happen when you discovered this new behavior or substance or this last thing that kind of took you over the edge, right? That really affected you. It's been a minute, right? We learned, it's the process. It wasn't overnight that I just had a challenge, even though that can happen on one instance just the same, as I shared earlier, somebody could smoke cannabis and really have, psychotic episodes, for example, right? Or have 2 sips of alcohol and really affect, whatever else might be going on with their physical and mental state. So, how do people get to recovery now, right? What's the pathway to? What are some of the things that would maybe, lead someone to want to make a change?
If it affects their relationships.
Okay, relationships. If you don't change this, I'm out of here. Awareness? What would bring about that awareness now?
Multiple things.
All right, let's get a couple examples. Let's get specific.
Trouble with the law, court.
Trouble with the law.
Could be.
Court.
Health scare.
Health scare. Relationships again.
And really the realization of the impact it has, whether it's a DUI and you hurt somebody or, just different things.
DUI, and it's kind of obvious, right?
Financial.
Financial challenges, okay? With the DUI, generally speaking, a person will, the statistics show will drive at least 100 times under the influence before getting caught.
Wow.
That's just on the DUI side of things. So those are, what else?
I guess also patterns, like once you start noticing yourself in similar situations repeatedly, whether that's like patterns of relationships or just similar outcomes, that can be sometimes like, okay, I'm in the same place over and over, something's what's going on?
I kept finding bruises. Where did this come from? What happened? Right? All of a sudden I woke up on the F train in Queens when I was going to Brooklyn originally. Oh, how'd that happen? Right, so pathways to overdose, right? Wake up at the hospital, somebody could, for a couple of years when I first started doing this work, I did a drinking and driver program, and you had people who literally had like a beer or two and say, oh, the cops were waiting outside the bar, they tricked us, it was a trap, to the person who like, hey, I woke up, at a 0.40 blood alcohol level, which means you're practically, on the other side, and I flipped my car, right? So anywhere in between, right? those were all challenges, right? Whether I was worried about the cops, right, the officers, whatnot, on the corner, or, you know, the obvious. So then, on the other side, so now that I have gotten to a place, you know, where I want change, I want something different, you know, I accepted help, or, you know, I decided, hey, I don't wanna, you know, wake up with bruises anymore, or I've noticed this isn't helping me, or, you know, these relationships, I keep getting in these pieces, right? You know, what might that look like? What do I do now? Where do I go? Where might I go from there? So I'm sorry, I'm gonna backtrack for 1 second. So I see everyone's looking at the guiding principles. So the things that will help recovery, and really the principles here, as Kevin brought up earlier, we have hope, right? It's driven by the individual, right? It's person driven. Many different ways, right? So that's the piece that we're on here. There's many different ways to get to recovery, but then now that I've came to Mass Higher and said, hey, I really wanna do something different, you know, I wanna take a different path, right? There's a million ways, right? So it requires, like all the different pieces, right? It's holistic. So we spoke of that earlier. There's other people involved, right? Not just myself. Relationships, we talk about culture, right? One thing that we don't speak of, we haven't spoken of here, there's most individuals that have substance use and or mental health challenges have gone through some kind of trauma, you know? And it could be as simple as watching the Twin Towers on the TV. Not so simple, and not to minimize that, but it could be something you've seen, right? On television, right? So it's built on our own strengths, right? So now that I was able to say, hey, I want help, or I want to do something different, or you know what, maybe somebody brings up something, right? So now you're in the workplace and you notice, hey, you know, your energy's been a little different, and you know, we weren't able to, you know, put together all of those reports that we were supposed to, you know, last week, you know? Is there something, you know, how can I support you with this, you know? Is there something that you can use support with outside of here that might be affecting it, you know? Then, okay, maybe, yeah, there is something, right? So, in supporting this person, just gently bringing it up, you know, the accountability piece, allowing somebody to have accountability and responsibility, what might that do for you, right? Because what happens to folks who have mental health and substance use challenges? Are they given responsibilities? No, it's taken away, right? They get cut off. No, you can't do this anymore, you can't have this, right? They get arrested, your children, you know, might get taken away, people are disconnected over and over, right? So if you take away my freedom and all this stuff, then how difficult is it for you to say, hey, forget about it, I don't care about any of this stuff, right? Very easy to go the other way. So now that I've recognized or say, hey, I want something different, where do I go? What might be a way that I can get help or support? Anybody?
EAP.
EAP, okay. EAP, great. Do I know of my EAP number in my organization? Does my organization have one?
I didn't know we had one until I asked. just recently.
Aha.
But you're 20 years.
Aha.
I think
have to
most
ask.
do, right?
Most should have something.
Yeah.
Something in place,
You'd hope.
whether it's
Not really
internal or external.
No, it's not.
Not really mentioned.
It's like a small little rider on your insurance that they throw in for like marketing,
Yeah.
Aha.
a very underused
Yeah.
sport.
So with the Recovery Ready Workplace, great piece to really bring to light and to let everyone know, hey, regardless, here's the number you can call. You don't gotta ask, no questions. We're not gonna ask you anything, you call them. What else? Where else would I go?
National and local hotlines.
National local hotlines, Massachusetts, 1-800-327-5050. That's a mass helpline. 24 hours a day, people in recovery answering the phone. Any kind of mental health and or substance use, and regardless of where you are in the state.
211, no?
211, that's a new one, newer
It's the
one.
413, is that for? Is it 413?
211 will give you assistance. whatever.
211, yeah, with general health questions,
Everything.
support, different informational, 211 also has a lot of services, you know, so you can just call, just generally speaking, not just substance use or mental health.
Right.
Some people might start by talking to their primary care to get referred to somebody, to mental health.
Talking to primary care, right? Hopefully they'll be able to speak with you, who are now a recovery ready workplace, right? And hey, we'll help you find that piece, right? Whatever it may be. So maybe some people are faith-based, right? Could come straight out of your culture. Hey, in my culture we used to do this, and you know, there's some of those, you know, practices or rituals or whatnot, you know, that families in different cultures have. Could be the church, I heard the church down the street, you know, they have some groups over there, I'm not sure what it is, right? Or it could be calling the local crisis number, you know, just calling and asking. You have your friend Google, right? You could always Google something, but speaking about it could be the first piece, because there's no one way, you know? Somebody could just say, hey, I stopped doing this and put my shoes on and I'm gonna start just going for walks around Ashley Reservoir.
Oh, I do that all the time.
Right?
I go every morning at 5 in the morning.
Ah, okay.
Every morning.
Beautiful, beautiful place. I haven't been there at 5 in the morning, but, you know, so, yeah, maybe it can literally be that simple.
And it is sometimes.
So really getting to know, you know, hey, what do I like? What works for me? You know, maybe getting on my bike, maybe, you know, going dancing. Maybe, hey, maybe I don't wanna go dancing, but I'm gonna crank up some tunes and dance right now, right? Cause I just wanna shake it out, right? You know, we're in person once again, but there's a lot of different online pieces and community, you know, supports. Some folks need medication, right? So they get referred to a doctor, to a psychiatrist, to therapy. No one way for this. And at different times, people are gonna need different things, right? Cause we don't have all of those areas together every day, right?
I think the past couple of years too, a lot of people have relied on using apps, different apps, whether it be wellness, meditation ones, or those talk ones where you can actually get connected with them.
Yeah, I've seen that commercial.
Yeah.
They always-
So, yeah, so there's more and more commercials, cause now it's mental health is a huge piece. And it probably started before COVID, when there was a lot of these shootings started happening,
I think COVID helped really put a spotlight on the mental health, and people had to go in lockdown because we're such, we need humans, and kind of
Yeah.
got taken away from us.
yeah, the numbers all doubled, and it really brought out a lot of things, cause now a lot of people lost purpose, a lot of people lost, you know, jobs, a lot of people lost all kind of stuff, right? Their loved ones.
Yeah, we lost a lot of things on this 10 guiding principles, whole person could like a lot of things they couldn't do.
Yeah, so just know one thing, there's no one way to do it, and everyone's an individual, and sure, there's like, you know, everyone hears about the 12-step group, that doesn't work for everyone, you know? So there's just no one way, you know, because often folks will be like, I'm not going to meetings. Hey, okay, all right. I didn't mention meetings, but that's okay, you know? That's, there's no one way, you know? That's not what you have to do. So here, recovery capital. The breadth and depth of internal and external resources that can be drawn upon to initiate and sustain recovery from alcohol and other drug problems, AOD. So there's what we call internal capital, external capital, right? So if we were to go really, let's say internal, right, and external. So external capital, I could say, hey, I can go to Mass Hire, right? Learn me a couple of skills, right? So I have now services agency, right? So that could be an external piece, right? I have my family, let's just say, right? I have transportation, my car just got inspected, so it's cool, right? So transportation. I had pizza for lunch. I was psyched because it's Friday, right? We're all together for the first time, right? So it could literally be that simple. Internal, I got awareness because, you know, I recognize that I started having these patterns. Maybe I have finally have some acceptance. Maybe not just of the situation, but of myself, finally. What might be some others? If you were to think of yourself and what's a piece of internal capital that you have that supports your well-being?
Peace, serenity, hope, purpose.
Okay. Whoa. Peace. What would be an external?
An external?
What's an external thing for you?
Employment, career.
Employment, okay.
I was thinking faith-based, so like a, you know, church or other spiritual.
Ah, that can go.
Right, I was thinking external, like.
Faith, the internal? Gotta have faith.
Spirituality.
And then at the church, there's an external piece, right? Something different, someone else. An internal piece and an external piece for you.
Meditation.
Meditation, where would that go?
For me, it's internal.
Internal, okay.
Exercise.
Okay.
Physical activity would be an internal.
Internal, okay. So the gym membership might be, just as an example, or I got my little weight bench at home, right? External capital. Did my little this morning. Coffee, love.
Speaking of which.
So you can, you know, you can continue, like, if you really think of, like, this as capital, you know, sometimes, these are all strengths that support you day to day, you know, as being the best you can be, however you define that, right? So what are those different pieces, and what do you recognize, you know? Somebody maybe isn't taking action out there, but they're calling you. They're still, you know, making their appointments. They're determined. They're looking for something, right? So that's something you could always like, hey, you're showing up. I see that you're determined, because even though this failed or this didn't work, or, you know, you're still here. you got up once again today. And look, you look great. You know, you took a shower, you know, you're dressed up, you know, for your interview. Right? So you see where we're, and I'm giving you a big overall, you know, I mean, it could be ice cream, could be coffee, could be, you know, hey, I got my ID, right? Piece of capital, that's gonna help me with my wellness for sure, right? Help me move forward. Maybe I have education, maybe I'm an intellectual person, so now I'm reading, I'm learning, right?
Isn't coffee a drug though?
It could be.
Is it possible that there are other drugs, technical drugs that you could put on either of those lists?
Sure, I mean, you could put hey, look, you could put medication on here, right? Right, you could have a doctor, you could have, you know, and
Yeah.
for somebody, it can be a challenge, right? I have a cup of coffee and I'm wired all day, all right? You know, and
Or you can't function without it.
Right.
Doesn't it sort of become like alcohol or anything else in that case?
I mean, it can, but you know, we're speaking of things that can be supportive, right?
Right,
I
right,
mean,
right.
pizza can be bad for you too, right? I ate one.
But it could.
Effect it has on your
To
life.
what extent and what is it, how is it affecting your life?
Now, this
Yeah,
is,
right.
The effect.
this is where that individual piece, you know, if you were to sit down and make a list of your recovery or wellness capital, maybe it would be on there, maybe it wouldn't.
Probably would be, yeah.
You know?
One of the external capital that popped in my mind earlier was the customers we serve, because they kind of feed my soul in a way, like, but it's an external, because they're not, it's, you know, just that interaction reminds me, educates me.
Aha, so here, interaction. That could be an internal piece, right? Now I'm in a position, I'm in a role, right? That I have this and I love I'm an only child, so I love being around other people. I've always loved being around others. And whenever there were like siblings that were fighting or whatnot, I'm always like, man, it feels so
Get a
good.
couple of
So,
money.
you know? So,
Trust.
bless you. So trust, absolutely. So you get the idea. You can really, you know, you have love, you have trust. You know, with some folks, yes, with some folks, not as much. You know, Gesundheit. You have care. You have, you know, a supportive team leader, right? Supportive colleagues. You have abilities. You have. You strive, right? So now this should be in your workbook as well. For this wellness continuum. You know, take a look at this. It's on page 15 of your workbook. Now, if you were to look at this, what does it make you think of? What's coming up as you look through this piece?
I think on the medical paradigm, you're just treating symptoms as opposed to trying to cure the illness and stuff.
Okay, one is treating versus maybe curing. You had something?
I was just looking at the question that's underneath it.
Uh-huh.
I told someone the other day that, you know, one of my guys tired of suffering, and so I told him, you know, you suffer because of the problem. Once you eliminate the problem, you eliminate the suffering. And so, looking at, you know, the reactive and the proactive it's your the main focus is focusing on how to, you know, how to thrive. How am I gonna thrive so I can feel better? You know, focusing on that reactive so that way the proactive can become.
Okay, so you're addressing it, that's what I hear you saying, and by addressing whatever the challenge or the piece may be, you know, can support you towards.
Yeah, like what Kevin just said, yeah.
Okay.
To be honest, when I'm looking at this, I feel like I'm doing this myself in my personal situation. I mean, I'm going through something personally, and when it first happened to me a couple of weeks ago, I was reacting. So I was just trying to make it feel better. I was just trying to correct my mistakes. I was all over the place. You could say I was episodic, and now a month into it, I put some stuff into place to prevent it, so I won't ever experience that again. I'm not just trying to fix it. I'm happy where I am now, and I want to maintain it. So.
Okay. You've addressed it. You recognized you were having challenge, and you were in the thick of it, so to speak. And by addressing it, you're now being proactive and taking action, and you've come out the other side. Okay. Okay.
So how would an employer use this tool in their conversation with staff?
Aha. What if you were to share it with somebody? Right, and say, hey, you know, where do you feel you would like to be, or maybe where do you feel you're at, you know, or what part, you know, would you want to look at? Because if you're looking at a challenge, where do we now feel like, would it be helpful to focus on these pieces, right? Or here, like what's the goal at the end of the day? I guess, you know, from the employer side, right? I imagine thriving and, you know, preventing somebody getting hurt on the job, let's say, right? Allowing the individual, right? So if I support you and give you the responsibility, right, to take action and the opportunity, right, as opposed to forcing you, you gotta do X, Y, Z, right? People are more likely, right, to want it, right, and to want to move forward and take action. So in looking at this, you can use this as like for the employer, for the manager person, how do you want to approach it? You know, you want to look at somebody and say, okay, this is what you have to do. This is what we're used to, right? We're treating symptoms, as Kevin mentioned. You know, we're treating it and then like, all right, get it done, get it out of the way. Or do I just want to treat this and keep it moving? Or do I really want to support the person in moving through and beyond?
That's cool. Yeah, I was thinking of it that way. It's like it's the immediate versus the long term. Like, let's fix this problem right now. Like, that's the knee-jerk reaction, right? It's like, okay, we gotta fix the problem and not really think about the longer term.
What happens when it happens again? If it happens again.
And that brings up, it can happen again, right? If you're just, you know, focused here on this side, right? So really for the manager, for the staff, even for everyone else to understand, hey, do I wanna just put a Band-Aid on it, so to speak? Or am I in it for the long haul? So this is where, like, you're looking at the business and at the employer, right? Now, are we in this for the short game, or are we in this for the long haul, right? Finite versus infinite, right? Do I want this organization to go in, you know, to grow and exist and thrive way beyond me? Or is it just about the now? How does that sound? Or make
Good.
sense?
I just wanted to cross it out loud so we can have some ideas on how we're impacting when we're training supervising employers, like what is the language we'll use, how do you connect it all dots, you know?
Yeah, and it's really about at the end of the day, the whole, right?
Right, yeah.
Like, so that 8 dimensions that we talk about, the individual, the organization and the company can think the same way, right? In terms of like, hey, we have all these different pieces and we don't just want it for the short term and put a Band-Aid on it. We want it, you know, hey, take it out, clean it up, right? Grow it, nourish it so that it'll be stronger, so that we know it can much easier prevent, right? And people will then want to be part of it, want to, I don't wanna say do better, but, you know, really for the whole, right? For us to all grow together.
Yeah, I think of like retention too, so if you're thinking of retention of employees that, you know, are good people, right? Good people, and you wanna retain them, so that's where I see this fitting in as well.
Yeah, if you're just gonna put a Band-Aid on it and, okay, you know, throw you back in the mix of things, so to speak, you know, and something happens again, maybe I'm more likely to skip out, right? Hey, I gotta go somewhere else, or I don't want, you know, maybe I feel bad, you know, whatever it might be, as opposed to like, hey, I'm being supported, and, you know, even if there is a setback, I still feel like I'll be supported, and you know, I want to move forward and grow with this, right? Because, you know, everything is temporary at the end of the day, right? We're, you know, this is a stepping stone to the next thing, whether you're here for, you know, 6 months or 6 years or, you know, whatever it is, right? So.
There's no short-term cure for a long-term condition that's chronic.
Right. And you think back to the conversation of like, oh yeah, I started smoking when I was 10, or I started taking little sips or eating the you know, the tiramisu or whatever, you know, with the you know, like when I was 10, hey, my mother put port wine on the fruit salad.
Oh, man.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, right? I wanted more of that stuff. Are you kidding me? You know, next thing you know, I'm sneaking the port wine out of the fridge, right? At 10.
My mother used to say that her Kahlua was chocolate milk. And all growing up, you know, it's like at age like
That
first
was
grade,
some
second
good
grade,
stuff.
I was having chocolate milk.
That sure was.
It was mom chocolate milk.
So here's the next piece. There's a worksheet. We have, it's called the artistry worksheet, which is over in, if, you know, just take a couple of minutes to look through it, right? And maybe you could pick one of these things to focus on, or 2 of them, and then you can take it and, you know, focus on the rest of it, you know, at another time. Because you might just be inspired to do that. Really, how do you think of these skills, right? And what might be an example of putting one of these into action, right? So how do you think of these skills along with one way to put it into action? So, you know, pick any which one. Yes?
Are you thinking, are we looking at this from the standpoint of being an employer, putting it into action with an employee kind of thing?
Absolutely, you can.
Okay.
I have
In
something.
supporting someone else, you know?
Okay.
I think with a lot of these really, but especially empathy, I wrote down at the bottom, lead by example. If you're vulnerable, that comes, oftentimes will bring that out in somebody else, so just leading by example.
Okay, so sharing a little bit of vulnerability, right? You know, that kind of sets an example where somebody else might much easier be like, oh, you know what, I can share this.
Right.
Or, you know, because this person, you know, has shared XYZ type of things. You
Well, and
know,
oftentimes in our classes, if you have a particularly quieter group, sometimes that's what we do as facilitators to prompt something. We'll share something that, you know, of our own experience, and then all of a sudden everybody's opening up.
chopping
I've
things
done
over
that.
into trust.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
The first week of our Future is designed that way purposely because, you know, when we first started talking to people, they think of vulnerability as a negative, like a weakness. And we have to talk to them about it's a strength because you're being vulnerable enough to accept new and to process new and to trust each other.
Yeah, that's the first thing. If somebody shares something hard or something that they just really went through, however so, or something awful that happened or whatnot, you know, just really thanking them for, you know, the courage, you know, to share this with me. That's huge, you know. And you gave that to me. You shared that with me. So,
It's a gift, it's a blessing and a curse.
so yeah, sometimes all at once, right?
Yeah.
Active listening as well.
Yeah.
I think
Tell-
it's very important, and you know, in the sense, it just shows respect in one sense. You know, that you care.
Or you're hearing
Care
them.
enough to
Understand, listen to
You're listening to
understand.
them, because sometimes they feel like people won't understand them if they try to disclose or share, so active listening shows again respect, and you're listening to them, you hear them.
And you're seeking to understand, right? Is that what you said?
Not to hear, listen to not hear, cause there's a difference between listening and hearing. You listen to understand what they're feeling.
Yeah, where are they coming from?
Yeah.
What's their intention, right? What's going on with them? So, of course, this isn't an exhaustive list by no means. You know, is there anything that comes up that you think that's not on the list that might be on your list?
hope.
Hope, okay. And how would you demonstrate hope?
So, I don't know, I guess the different approaches depending on where people are. Maybe offer examples of success or recovery.
Okay.
Maybe hope means encouragement.
Haha. Belief, right? Believing that, you know, someone can, you know, maybe you're pointing out a couple of their strengths and I know that you can because I see that you've done this, that, the other thing.
I think that feeling comes across when you do someone's resume and you're sitting with them and you give it to them for the first time and you're like, I'm a human, I'm validated, I have skills, I have potential, like all that from a resume, you know? It's that hope you give them.
Yeah, you know, which pieces of your work, of your, you know, job, of your, maybe your day-to-day or of the process that you have here, you know, can inform you, right? And inform individuals, just as that example of the resume, you know, can it really inform somebody of maybe their strengths or skills that they have, or maybe even bring up, you know, concerns or things that they might seek, you know, hey, what would this do for you? What could this, you know, do for you? Right?
Sorry.
No, I thought
I was, no, I did, I put, another one, I put down persevere.
Aha, perseverance.
It
Okay,
shows
persevere.
on both ends, but more so yourself, cause it shows the other person that you're as much invested as they are, or should be.
Aha. Okay, so you're demonstrating that you're
I'm in
all
this,
in,
all in.
just as
I'm in
they
this,
are.
Yep.
Or maybe even if you're just peaky toe in the water, I'll be all in with your peaky toe.
Mm.
And that's okay. And that's okay. All we need is that one little crack, right? Light's gonna come through there. And how can I be curious about that one little crack, that one little piece, you know, that might be viewed as defective really quick, but you know, the more you start questioning and being curious about it, it can really bring up, you know, and uncover a whole lot of stuff that might actually be amazing, you know? So, you just never know. You just never know about people until we ask, you know, like we originally said today, earlier today.
I think you also have to be mindful and cautious. And you need to watch what you say, you can trigger them, because it's something that can make them doubt themselves or compare themselves. Just have to
Yeah.
keep that in mind.
Yeah, mindfulness, cautious, there goes that human experience language and watching how we speak about, you know, these different challenges or behaviors. That's awesome. Thank you.
Pointing out
Anything?
some of these quality skills and abilities, usually in a situation like this, that kind of set on, they're their own worst critic, so to speak, especially at a point like this where things are on the table.
And what are you bringing to light, right? Which side, again, right, are you focused on? Right? Are we focused on what's wrong? Or are we focused on what's strong, right, about folks? And that's a big piece of it, how we speak. So, yeah, thank you for bringing that up. We have workshops on that as well. Whole workshops we could really sit and work together to really tease out. Because again, all of this is a lot of materials, a lot of different things, you know, for an hour and a half, right? You know, so hopefully you'll take this and be curious about it. Talk to somebody else about, you know, some of these pieces. Google it, right? Make a phone call. See, hey, you know what? Let me see what that 800 number he was talking about is. Hey, let me check on that EAP status, right? Or what might be available, you know? Or I know somebody that has this type of challenge, or a family member that has this type of disability. How can I find out more about that, right? So it's good practice also for you to support your own folks, you know, and your staff and your colleagues, you know, in the Recovery Ready workplace. So,
I think, going back to what we were talking about stigma, and you showed that slide with all the words, like appropriate language is so important to teach employers as well. Like, I think that would be a big piece of it, is knowing how to talk about it. I think that's a big issue, you know, in terms of language.
You may wanna add a section to this about that. I have some, like a slide about it.
we could, I mean, we talk about it throughout,
Yeah.
you know, but again, an hour and a half, you know, we can put it to and kind of dig in a little bit more, you know, on these, you know, but again, you know, as a Recovery Ready workplace, you know, we don't expect you to be coaches and counselors and therapists and you know, but it's a lot of different pieces, but really it's this approach, this recovery oriented approach. If you go back to the 10 principles, you know, if you look at this as kind of a little guideline, you know, and you could sit, you know, and look through this and, hey, what does this mean for me and, you know, for you as an individual, and then you support others using some of these principles, you'll be okay. You'll be okay. And the, on the back, there's a resources list, which you can pull up a lot, and actually most of the things on the presentation, there's a resource that goes with it. So there's a lot more that you can really dig into it. And if you'd like additional support, you know, feel free to reach out at any time as well. Paul at choicerecoverycoaching.org. And here is this is the last question, right? What do you feel you need to be prepared? You know, page 17. That was awesome color. What do you feel you need to be prepared for your Recovery Ready workplace?
A pen, Paul, where do I sign?
Wonderful. Wonderful. Does anyone have anything like to share on this? I mean, it definitely is a question for you to contemplate and to work through and to see, you know, what piece you might want to dig into a little more, or wanna work through with your colleagues or on your own?
I would like to ask the group if anybody, like, we went through a lot of information, anybody have any suggestions from a employer, like, so now you're all the boss for 5 minutes?
Darn.
As an employer, like, what questions would you have? Because this is gonna be the orientation you're giving to employers, supervisors, so any suggestions you have now, why it's fresh in your mind, would be helpful as we tweak this along the way.
How much does it cost?
It's free.
For you, my friend, no charge.
For you, $200 and one coffee maker.
I'm gonna bring something up, but this may be a longer discussion.
Oh, great.
But as I was sitting here, I'm thinking of like managers and supervisors sitting through this, and a lot of people internally feeling like, oh, I drink, well, I smoke weed sometimes, like, you know, having this feeling of like, well, how am I supposed to do this if, you know, if I myself, but maybe they don't feel like they have a you know, a substance use, but they do, you know, casually or whatever.
They socially interact
right,
with,
feeling this like, I don't think I could do this because I don't really feel like it's my place. I don't know, that's what I was kind of thinking.
Being a hypocrite,
That's
I'm trying to get in the
great.
head of.
That's,
no,
you know, I mean, that is awesome because of multiple reasons. Because, hey, now it gets you to look at, what's going on with me? Right? Now, and it doesn't mean that you're wrong or just like someone who might truly have a challenge, right? Because if that's the case, you know, everyone who you're working with has gone through some variation of, you know, some challenge somewhere, right? So, am I able to, is this not a challenge for me? Have I been able to address whatever other challenges and I just have, you know, I'm able to socialize in a healthy, you know, way? If that's the case, that somebody's thinking about that, then maybe it'll inspire them to look at their own wellness, you know, and what's going on with them, you know, and maybe one of their colleagues and or staff, you know, it might bring up discussion at the next barbecue. You know, it's not meant to, it's really meant for conversation. So if it brings up conversation, you know, and questions for individuals, we're doing our job.
Yeah.
It goes to understanding that some people are allies of people in recovery.
Yeah.
Not everybody has to be in recovery. To show empathy and understanding and to break down the stigmatism, and that it's awareness, and trying to get that awareness across so we can break down that stigmatism for those that need more help and support, for those that want the help and support.
Yeah, conversation, you know, not everyone has a challenge, and maybe it was a challenge today, maybe it was a one event type of thing, or maybe it's something that might be need a little bit more, you know, digging into, a little bit more support, or, you know, something else to look at, or someone else to speak with, you know, about this, you know. But if it brings up conversation, then wonderful, that's what you want it to do.
Yeah, I can just picture a lot of sort of supervisor managers having a hard time addressing these kinds of things, especially if you don't sort of come from a social background. Like, I'm thinking of not a nonprofit organization where you may have a lot of people who have that kind of background or that training or whatever. But I think like at corporate level, maybe you don't have that training, you don't really know how to relate so well to people or whatever, then it might be trickier to have those kinds of, the ability to have those kinds of conversations.
Have the ability to designate the appropriate person for that.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's that leadership, you know, a lot of folks in leadership, you know, might have a lot of these attributes or some understanding of a lot of these different components, right? You know, and maybe I'm not the right person, you know, like you said, maybe I can, you know, be a leader and say, you know what, I gotta mull this over a little more, I gotta really look at some things, you know, maybe there's somebody else, you know, I recognize that Salinas might be much better for this this role, you know? You know, why don't you call up the Mass Hire people and we'll get you in the next, you know, workshop, because I think you would have really benefited and liked it, and maybe, I imagine you could be in that role, you know? So that's all part, you know, those pieces, you know, and really bringing up, once again, identifying your colleagues' recovery capital, and just even take out the word recovery, just, you know, their own personal wellness capital. You know, we all have these different pieces, you know, what are the strengths of the different people on our team, because since I'm the manager, the director of the department, they sent me, but maybe I might not be the right person for this, and I recognize that, you know, Kevin might be better at this, you know, because he has this certain easygoing way that, you know, he's able to communicate with everyone, you know, in a special kind of way, you know, that I don't always have. So that's just all part of that, and again, putting this stuff into practice, you know, highlighting, recognizing, you know, and just asking about this stuff with your colleagues, you know, with yourselves. Great question, really great question.
Yeah, just two comments. I think, like, one, you know, I think a lot of times when we talk about workplaces, we think it's like an environment where you're supposed to kind of like not be emotional or not bring your personal life, and I think these workshops are like inherently a little bring up emotions, whether you're reflecting on your own experiences or, you know, people you know. So even just like letting people know that, you know, the space is welcome to you know, to emotions or to your personal life, because, you know, we are humans and we come to work, and so therefore, you know, human experience. But I think also something I'm thinking about as well is just talking about, or even just acknowledging the differences for different people. So like, you know, if you come from a family where people are very open and it's okay to talk about it, versus if you come from a family where it's a lot stricter, or you don't acknowledge that, or if you even have family alone, or if you have, you know, the resources to take off of work to address your recovery, or also just how people are treated differently, like based on your gender, race, you know, cultural backgrounds. Like some people are given more care or grace, or like, oh, we understand, versus some people are like a lot more harshly punished. So I think acknowledging that could be also good.
Yeah, you made me think of culture, right? You know, our family culture, you know, whether it's, you know, where we come from, and all of that really plays a part. And also here, again, in the workplace, you have an opportunity to create, you know, your own culture, right? And what does that look like? You know, and if maybe it's a place where things are real strict, and like, oh, this boss is always yelling, and everybody's, you know, on their toes, you know, what might ease some of that? What might facilitate, you know, where might that individual need some support, right? It's not just the person with any behavior, any kind of challenge, you know, because I think it's very easy to say, oh, the person, you know, pushing the shopping cart on the street, you know, type of thing. No, it can be any one of us, like we said earlier, you know, and it doesn't mean it has to be substances, or I mean any behavior, because maybe substance is just a little part of it, right? You know, a person has health stuff, and you have a couple of drinks and blood pressure and this, and then that affects, right? It doesn't mean I'm an alcoholic, right? But that somehow affects it. Maybe I don't even recognize that that's part of it, but maybe that person needs some support in one of those other areas, right? Of the dimensions. Maybe it's not substances like in our face. Maybe stress, right? Talk about mental health. Stress is part of that, you know? So how do we break it down and kind of make it more everyday and not so extreme, you know? So as we're breaking this stuff down and saying, hey, you know, like you were a little extra nervous about your review, you know, like how can I talk to that individuals say, hey, what would have made it easier, you know, and let's look at, look, you accomplished this, you accomplished that, you did this, you did the other thing. Wow, I'd be pretty psyched, right? You know, or what's on the line for it, you know, what's the outcome, what are you imagining, right? So to just have these conversations, you know, because it's not, doesn't have to be so extreme, so black and white.
So this is gonna take, time and resources away from our organization. What is our organization gonna gain as a result of taking this pledge?
Imagine if that person that's super stressed, you know, and bringing that down on everybody else, right? Imagine if that person wasn't as stressed. What if imagine they had some support? What could that do for your outcomes and for everybody? You know, instead of saying, oh, Friday, I'm gonna go home, right? Instead of them thinking like, oh, 5 hours left, right? You know, they get to 5:05 and be like, oh, damn, time to go home already? All right, so it's a little difference. It's a difference there, you know? So what will that do for your bottom line? So, you know, again, are you playing this finite game or are you playing an infinite game? You know, are you here for the short term or the long haul? So that can, you know, make or break a whole organization. Does that sound challenging?
No, it doesn't sound challenging.
Yeah, it might take a little bit of elbow grease, you know, to begin, but you know, like anything else, you get on cultures change. We change. We're humans, right? We're definitely resilient,
Evolving.
evolving.
You know, when there's a conversation about recovery, but it really is a holistic approach to managing people, humans, you know. We're just giving it a label because we're trying to address an overall, you know, huge problem that's affected our workforce, but the reality is, we're just trying to change there's so many things that we can talk about that are problems for employees, and building that trust. The Recovery Ready Workforce can help you build a trust amongst your team, your employers, that allow for some tough conversations, allow you to be there for each other.
To imagine what this can prevent. You know, just because you had, I don't know, 3 out of 100 people, you know, that had like this obvious, you know, but now everyone's having these conversations, or maybe not everyone. Let's say 30, a third of your organization is having these conversations. You know, how does that affect everyone else? And even though somebody doesn't have like this extreme, you know, or intense problem or challenge, right? You can diminish, you know, whatever challenge it may be, you know, and facilitate next week's outcomes and well-being. So people are smiling and psyched to come to work, as opposed to being like, ugh, Monday, right? Yeah, I'm not a fan of the TGIF crowd myself, even though I like a day off once in a while, don't get me wrong, you know. But yeah, again, lifestyle, right? I want to be well. Everybody wants to be loved and wants to be well and wants to, you know, have, you know, their needs met, right? Financially and all that stuff. So it doesn't have to be as hard as we make it sometimes, you know. And in the spirit of a gentleman I met recently, Dr. Diversity, he says everybody needs recovery. Everybody. Everybody can use a little support, a little help somewhere.
Read that.
So, thank you, and definitely, if there's anything else you feel, you know, that could be added or changed or taken out or whatnot. This was awesome to do a little pilot, little test. And I know that you all have done a lot of different pieces of this already. Our pleasure. Thank you. You know, and, you know, I know that at Mass Hire, you know, you've done a lot of these different things already, so, you know, but imagine for the folks who don't have any of this stuff, you know, or minimal, like they had one little DEI something, you know. You know, the concepts are, you know, we hope to be able to present it and to make it easily, you know, palatable and easily identified, so that like it's not like just the extreme, you know, person on, you know, on the corner, so to speak, you know, because it's not the person on the corner, it is all of us in one way or another. We all have wellness, you know. Where are we at though? We all have wellness. We're all functioning. To what extent? So, yay. So, yeah, in person, live. It's Friday night.
Thank you. So for the team, if you guys could take, Melinda, like, filmed, I don't know who got to watch it, who didn't, filmed our, Recovery Ready launch. But what's on there is the different testimonials by an employer, HMR, Trish Leonard, and she's someone that's been in recovery for 20-something years. And she's open that her son is in recovery right now and has, I know that first day has, you know,